Hello, my name is Dr. Eszter Trufan, and this is Experimentium, a paradigm shift for OER lab courses lightning talk. Experimentium is a content collection dedicated to chemistry labs. At its core, there are a few important concepts. First, all content that is included on the Experimentium website will be free, and that includes all prompts, experimental protocols, associated supply lists, and any tutorials and supporting materials. However, because this content is associated with chemistry labs, and that will require some materials, equipment, occasionally probes and instrumentation, there may be a cost associated with performing the experiments that you will find on Experimentium. All of the content that is included in the Experimentium collection will be aligned with AAC&U rubrics on critical thinking, quantitative reasoning, and even teamwork. The resources that are thus created have instructions, recommended participation requirements, and assessment that are setting a standard for either a rigorous experiment or a collection of rigorous experiments inside a course. All the chemistry experiments demonstrations are video-based and have captions. This allows for students to have a front row seat to the demonstrations and get the same experience whether they are in the front of the room or in the back, and whether they are in a quiet area or a lab space. The captions will additionally allow students who are unfamiliar with the chemistry jargon to see it spelled out correctly. The Experimentium collection aims to incorporate sustainable materials in order to minimize hazardous waste creation in the teaching lab, but also to allow for these experiments to be conducted in areas outside of the traditional chemistry laboratory, allowing for the instruction to take place remotely and the experiments to be completed at home. The Experimentium collection supports structured learning through uniformly formatted prompts that convey consistent expectations. This way, regardless of which experiments are selected for a course or course collection, all included content shares the same voice, organization, and learning outcomes. The only things that are different will be the experiments themselves, the context, the techniques, and the topics, but the expectations remain the same. The content that is incorporated in the Experimentium collection aims to utilize as much as possible everyday materials, integrate visually impactful, tactile, and even olfactory experiences, and then to support the relatability of the content further, discussion questions are incorporated that elicit the exploration of connections between the experiment topics, practiced skills, or materials used to everyday applications. Or in some cases, they elicit connections to future careers that students may be interested in. The Experimentium content collection has a variety of resources. The instructor resources that you can access by pressing the instructor resources button will lead you to the grading rubric. We recommend that students come prepared, and that sets the standard for a student-centered learning experience. In order for students to come prepared, they need to know what they're going to do, which is where watching the videos and writing their own protocols comes in. They need to know what materials they will be working with. That's where the chemical table comes in. And the equipment table is where they list all the equipment that they will be using. The grading rubric for the second piece will support what students do in the classroom, and that includes performing the experiment while recording and organizing their data. These are our recommendations, however, all aspects of the rubrics will be editable. The data processing section addresses all the questions that relate to performing calculations or any other manipulations of the data that are required to derive adequately supported evidence-based conclusions. The final piece is a discussion, which we recommend to have more of a larger essay-style format with a length that you may decide for yourself. The recommendation is that this discussion is graded on 3 criteria, thus helping students improve their ability to write. The scientific language has a supporting role, but it is important to get students thinking about scientific writing, which should be more clear and concise. And then finally, the format will allow students to practice adequate subscripts and superscripts in a chemistry context. To support teaching of teamwork and supporting students as they create their own functional interactions with each other, we have developed a couple of case studies that are specific for chemistry labs. In order to support instructors committed to providing accessible education to all their students, we commit to following these guidelines on all our created resources. When it comes to the student resources, to access them, all you have to do is press the Student Resources button. The content collection includes lab technique videos that will be useful to students as they prepare for a potential practical exam at the end of the semester. Here are some videos that may be helpful. For all of these, the closed captioning can be enabled as needed, and it can be watched at the speed of their choosing. Currently, the settings are in English, but they can be modified to other languages. Chemistry tutorials are going to provide the content-based experiment-related explanations that students may need to make sense of the observations they just recorded. And here are some examples associated with those experiments. As always, the associated closed captioning can be enabled, and videos may be watched for as long or as little as needed to fill in any existing gaps. Math tutorials have been recorded by math faculty, and we have videos in both English and Spanish on the appropriate use of calculators to solve chemistry-related problems, especially as it relates to answering questions associated with lab manipulations. The associated closed captioning can be enabled in the original language, and translations can be available with a change of event. To support students on their scientific writing journey, we included a tutorial on how to write chemistry lab reports with specific tips and tricks that are particular to scientific writing. Accessibility support, in addition to the existing resources, is in the process of development. We have collaborated with an accessibility expert who recorded a description of the tactile experiences blind and visually impaired students may encounter when working with chemistry, glassware, and specific lab equipment. When selecting an experiment, users can either press the chemistry experiment button on the top or the choose an experiment button at the bottom. Both of those options are going to lead to a series of filters that will allow users to select the experiment of their choice. Once selected, the experiment will come in the same sections that can be edited and removed if needed. Here is one example of how that may look like. The first section of every experiment is going to be a collection of video links. The top ones are going to be the demonstrations of the experiment, and the ones on the bottom are going to include all the conceptual background that is necessary. The next part is going to contain the pieces of our recommended pre-lab that will give students specific guidance on how to prepare for an upcoming lab experiment. All of these have tags associated with the critical thinking and the quantitative reasoning rubrics. The second piece supports the data collection and processing. It provides guidance, occasionally more if the experiment is more complex, on how to complete the experiment and what kind of data to collect, as well as what kind of calculations are necessary to build a cohesive argument. Finally, their discussion format is presented here, but because the document is editable, you may choose to have a longer, shorter version of it. You may want to change the presented types of questions. We have the categories tagged, all of which are going to link either to the quantitative reasoning, which includes representation, manipulation, analysis when it comes to numbers, and assumptions and limitations. The experiment design, some of the conceptual analysis, the existing knowledge, research, and views are going to be part of the critical thinking rubric dimensions. Our recommendation is that students should have a choice in the types of questions they want to answer, but in order to establish a standard across multi-section courses, instructors may come together and select a collection that all students need to address. When you press the Choose a Course button, you will have the option of selecting any of the recommended course collections. There may be some overlap between courses, as some experiments may be suitable for multiple. Our current course collection contains General Chemistry 1 experiments, both for in-person and remote modalities, General Chemistry 2 experiments for both in-person and some remote options, Introductory Chemistry in both in-person and remote versions, Organic Chemistry and Biochemistry, both of which currently only contain experiments that can be done in a designated chemistry laboratory. When selecting a course, a template will be pre-populated for you with experiments that we set as default, but as always, you will have the opportunity to customize it to your needs by either removing, replacing, or editing the included experiments. For now, the whole video collection is available on YouTube, and you can access them by simply searching for Experimentium. The complete website, which in addition to including the presented resources, will also have the ability to generate the associated supply and chemical lists, is in the process of development and is expected to be completed by 2025. Thank you.